Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Stacked. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Andre Serrano. I hope I pronounced that correctly. From Stacks, I think he's leading product at Stacks. Yeah, we're curious to dive into the Stacks ecosystem today. Listen a bit to Andre and tell us about everything that's going on Stack. But on Stacks, very confusing Stacks and Stack. But first of all, welcome, Andre. Super glad to have you here. How are you today?
Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having me here, Jeroen.
Awesome to see you here after actually seeing you a few times over the last couple of months in different conferences. It's good to have you on the podcast. So super excited to record this one. We've hung out a little bit, but I think this is another level in our friendship. So super excited to do this. Before we actually dive into everything on Stacks itself, want to dive into you a little bit. Get a little bit more of your history, your background. Where did you grow up? What did you study? All these things. How did you get into this industry? Give us the download.
Awesome. Sure thing. Well, first, likewise, great seeing you in Asia. Got to spend a couple of weeks hanging out there at different conferences. So it was great to see you there. As far as my background, from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, ended up going to University of Penn, studying a program called PPE. It was philosophy, political science, and economics. Shortly after graduating, I discovered crypto. I've been in the space since early 2017. First as an investor, raised a small fund in SPV, made several early stage investments around that time. And then later on as a builder. And so, funny enough, one of the investments that we made at the time was in a company called Blockstack, did the first SEC regulated Reg A offering. Blockstack, the company, ultimately launched Stacks. And so have been involved in the ecosystem since 2019 when I first made that investment. Ultimately, in 2021, when the mainnet launched, I became much more actively involved, started contributing to various projects, joined the foundation where I was the SBTC resident, led all of the product and partnership initiatives for SBTC. And then actually most recently, we've spun up a new company called Bitcoin L2 Labs, which is completely focused on core product development for Stacks, which includes both SBTC as well as some of our other like core protocol upgrades. So I'm the head of product here now, and we're building out a team of engineers to help to scale Stacks as we enter into this next era of the protocol. So it's been a long journey in the ecosystem, but happy to be here.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. I actually want to dive in a little bit further and pick at something. I mean, first of all, you're from Philly. You're a Sixers fan.
I am. Long time Sixers fan.
Did you go to the games when like Allen Iverson was still like?
Of course.
Oh man.
You can't grow up in Philly without being an AI fan.
Oh wow, I'm so jealous. Like two AIs, right? Andre Iguodala and Allen Iverson. Oh wow, man, that was a great time. Very jealous of having lived that period in Philly. That must have been great. So you say, if I understand correctly, like straight from the school banks, basically you went to investing. That's an interesting kind of twist. How does that even work?
Yeah, well, technically, I spent the first couple of years of my career in media, but it feels like it was a lifetime ago. But I was always on more of the frontier tech part of media. I worked on some virtual reality projects, and then ultimately, was brought into the space by a close friend of mine, and basically fell down the rabbit hole.
Wow. Okay. Got it. That makes sense. I mean, you mentioned, I think, SBTC a couple of times. I think we can dive into that as well. But so it was 2017, you say, right? You started really like diving into crypto. That's about pretty much the same time as Stacks itself started, right? What was the industry like back then? Like I joined a little bit. I think I'm similar to you, kind of joined the industry as an investor 2017, but then left earlier, like after everything kind of came down. I left the industry and only came back a bit later, 2021. But what was the industry like even as like an insider, investor, and eventually like builder in 2017? Give us some more context.
Yeah, I think that it was much smaller. In fact, I even remember, going to some of Maniv's old talks in New York, especially the New York crypto scene back in 2017 was very small. And so you were able to really get to know a lot of the key players and projects. But it was a good time. I mean, I think anyone that's been in the space from that long has seen a few of these cycles over that period. But I think you just learn to try to drown out some of the signal from the noise, and it's got us to where we are now.
Yeah. And so you mentioned like you started as an investor, kind of became a builder. What is it that drew you to the like builder side? Like what's that like catalyst for you to really say like, well, investing, maybe you still do, but like I'd like to focus on product.
Yeah. So it was funny. So the first project that I joined on the builder side was an OG project called Zcash. So Zcash was a fork of Bitcoin that launched in 2016 and was actually the first project to launch zero knowledge proofs in production. So I think this kind of started my interest in the intersection of Bitcoin and zero knowledge and ways that we can scale Bitcoin and include new use cases around privacy and smart contracts as part of that. And so, at the time I was researching Zcash and sort of recognized the importance that zero knowledge proofs would have in our industry, and also the idea that privacy would be a really key design principle for the space in order to have better on-chain privacy preserving properties, and ultimately looking at some of the use cases. I figured that would be a key sort of like design area. I've been a little bit surprised that it's been we haven't seen more in that space. I guess it's kind of difficult to operate in that. But ultimately, a lot of the work that was done on Zcash at the time has ended up powering a lot of the work that we see in terms of scalability and threshold signature designs for Bitcoin. So it's super interesting to see that overlap. And that's what really got me into the building side, and had the chance to work with some of the leading cryptographers and cypherpunks in the Zcash ecosystem at the time. Thought it would be a great opportunity to learn from them, sort of be at the forefront of zero knowledge proofs. And that's what ultimately led me to this.
Wow. So very early, I would say, in the ZK knowledge industry, I would say, or like, I don't know how you call it, but very, very early on that trend. And you kind of continue to pursue that and continue to stay on the Bitcoin side as well, right? I think because at that time was also when Ethereum started to really pop up. You have this alternative like to build smart contracts, whereas on Bitcoin, that's hard, right? Seems like you chose the harder route and like not opt for the easy way to go and build on Ethereum. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I think that there was a thesis at the time that was published by Wences Casares, I believe, in 2019. It was called "A Case for a Small Allocation to Bitcoin," where he basically laid out a case for why Bitcoin could ultimately take some of the best features that were designed in other parts of the ecosystem and ultimately bring that back to Bitcoin itself. And now you hear jokes that ETH was the testnet, but we're starting to see some truth to that, where truly a lot of the interesting things happening around the ecosystem are starting to find its way back to Bitcoin. And personally, I've always had sort of a more ideological or mission-driven approach to the space. I think that Bitcoin is very important for economic freedom and individual self-sovereignty, with the ability to provide access to basic finances and sound money to people around the world. And so I think at heart, I've always been a Bitcoiner. And so that's what kept me in the side of the space.
And a true OG with true like Bitcoin principles at heart. I like it. I actually noticed that in your Twitter profile as well. You, I think, what does it say? Sovereign individual building on Bitcoin. Tell me more. Why is that like sovereign aspect so important to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that sovereignty is the really the ability to have more agency over your decisions and your finances, and so being able to participate in a system that can't be a monetary system that can't be devalued, that can't be confiscated, gives you a lot of agency over how you live your life. And I think that has always been a key sort of principle when I think about some of the benefits of working in this space.
Yeah. No, I align with that. Well, would you think the same if you were not born and raised in the US?
I think it becomes more important if you're not born in the US, right? I think that from my experience, people in the US have a harder time resonating with these ideals because for most people, the financial system works okay, right? Most people don't have experience being unbanked, except there are, of course, certain parts of the US where, there are significant challenges with access to basic finance and being underbanked. But when you go outside of the US, that problem becomes even more important, right? And, countries like Argentina know what it's like to have a government default on their currency multiple times and have their savings wiped out. And so the ability to save in a non-sovereign currency, I think, and also sending global payments that are frictionless and settle instantly. I think these things are just more intuitive to people that have lived in a system where their monetary and payment systems don't work as well and don't serve the average people there. So yeah, I think outside of the US, that's even more clear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I want to shift gears a little bit away from the philosophical aspect. It's more about like the Bitcoin economy today, and like obviously it's grown quite a bit. I think you guys started building quite a while back. You guys were early, but it's only now I feel like there's been some significant like traction and visibility and attention towards at least. The overall like Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe because I'm more recent in the industry, you tell me. But where do you think we stand now compared to a couple of years back, and where do you think this Bitcoin economy is heading?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say I like that you use this term Bitcoin economy. It's something that I think about a lot, and it speaks to this idea that we're building an ecosystem of apps on top of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin really serves as this secure foundation and a settlement layer that you can build all sorts of decentralized applications. And I think that certainly aligns with my philosophy for how the space is around Bitcoin is going to evolve. My general take on kind of where we are right now is that it's still very early. Where over the past 18 months, we've seen a lot of activity happening on Bitcoin. We've seen a lot of teams getting funded to build Bitcoin layers, to build Bitcoin DeFi protocols. But yet the ecosystem is still very nascent. So when you look at it, Bitcoin probably has around 12 billion in total value locked today. That includes assets like wrapped Bitcoin, like TBTC, Stacks, Babylon, and other sort of DeFi protocols. That's still very early. When you compare that to Ethereum, which has 86 billion TVL as of today, and yet Bitcoin is 4 times as large as Ethereum, right? So it seems like there is a lot of room to grow in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I expect this to really come together over the next 12 to 24 months. I think that Bitcoin TVL could surpass 100 billion TVL by the end of 2025. That's like the big thing that I'm looking at, just as a relative fraction of Bitcoin's market cap. I think that we'll see that kind of growth. So, call it at least a 10x over the next year. And I think part of the reason for that is that the value proposition around Bitcoin is so clear, right? So Bitcoin is the largest cryptocurrency by market cap. It is the most liquid, the most secure, most hash rate backing it. It has the most regulatory clarity, the most institutional adoption, and no other protocol really even comes close. So there's no second best when it comes to that. So I think that we'll continue to see that develop. And the last thing for me is just the developer mindshare that's come to Bitcoin. I think really since the Taproot upgrade and ordinals, we've seen a lot of teams that are wanting to experiment with new models on Bitcoin in terms of new bridging models, bringing Zk to Bitcoin. And so the developer mindshare is real. And so I think all of these things set us up for a pretty huge catalyst over the next 24 months.
Here you go. The bull case for the Bitcoin economy by Andre Serrano. I think that's very well described. And I align with all these things, man. Like I'm with you, and I'm also a big believer that like Bitcoin TVL or DeFi, like on Bitcoin, will surpass the one on Ethereum. I don't know the time frame, but to me, it's like natural. The community is there. Also, like the attention is there, as you say. The asset is there. Big believer of that as well. Now let's dive into what you guys specifically are doing, right? Like let's talk a little bit about Stacks. Maybe I don't know. Like I mean, you're the product guy at Stacks. Give me a short intro on like what is Stacks, especially for the people who don't know what's so special about Stacks. What's the value prop? What are you guys building? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, sure. So at a high level, right, Stacks is a Bitcoin layer. It's been on mainnet live since January 2021. It's first started actually as Munib's PhD thesis at Princeton. So he's been working on this problem for a while. Actually took the original company through Y Combinator. The project itself has a lot of very well-known backers, from Union Square Ventures to the Harvard Endowment Fund. And as I mentioned earlier, it was the first project to go through a regulated token sale offering. And so I think that to me was a signal very early on that the team here was approaching things in the right way. And really had a long-term vision in mind for how this ecosystem would develop. And so when you look at it from more of like a technical perspective of what is the Stacks blockchain, so it's an account-based blockchain that allows anyone to write smart contracts and decentralized apps on Bitcoin. So ultimately, the vision or the goal is to unlock Bitcoin programmability to be able to use in decentralized applications. As part of that, we've developed our own virtual machine known as Clarity. It has some unique features, including the ability to read Bitcoin state directly, as well as some security features like post conditions that help to give more developers more control over the smart contracts that they deploy in terms of those security features. Lastly, one of the things that makes Stacks really unique, I think it's part of our secret sauce, is the consensus mechanism is pretty unique. So Stacks developed a consensus called proof of transfer that was an iteration on proof of burn, where basically Stacks became the first project to unlock a native Bitcoin yield, right? So it was one of the first projects really looking into Bitcoin staking. Where the way it would work is essentially users who lock STX and consensus are able to earn a native L1 Bitcoin yield as part of that. And that's basically done by miners who are bidding Bitcoin for a chance to win a Stacks block, and that Bitcoin gets transferred to the users who have locked their STX and consensus. So that was a pretty unique model. Also, as part of that, through this consensus mechanism, a hash of all of the transactions on the L2 were ultimately settled down to the L1. And so all Stacks miners actually have to do an L1 transaction as part of that. And so, they're actually contributing to the Bitcoin fee market. And we like to think of it as like a buyer of last resort for Bitcoin block space, which is definitely, a more Bitcoin aligned feature. But yeah, that's kind of, how Stacks got its start, and sort of a high level overview of both, kind of what the goals are and, how the system is constructed.
Got it. That's super. I'm learning here as we go. Proof of transfer, proof of burn. Want to like double click on some of these things. So proof of transfer, like if I understand correctly, so do I understand it's like a set of validators that will be running the Stacks chain, but then in order to validate the next block, you have to be a Bitcoin miner? No, like you have to.
Yeah, so happy to jump in there. So basically, in the Stacks blockchain, there are two roles. There are miners and there are signers. Okay. Miners are the ones that are producing Stacks blocks, and to do that, they're actually spending Bitcoin for a chance to win a Stacks block. And in exchange for spending that Bitcoin, they are winning the Stack block, which includes the Stacks Coinbase custody, the Coinbase reward, as well as all the transaction fees on the network. Stacks validators, or we call them signers, essentially are the ones that are validating those blocks and ensuring that they are adhering to the consensus logic. Yeah. And for doing that work, they're earning that Bitcoin yield that's transferred to them from the miner. So that's how the two roles kind of coexist in the system.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't come up with it, but it does make it does make logical sense. What about proof of burn? What's that?
I don't think we need to go too deep into proof of burn. That was kind of like one of the early R&D phases that kind of like got us to this proof of transfer model, where essentially basically you're spending a base asset. So the way that you can think about it is that in proof of transfer, you're spending a scarce asset or a scarce resource, just like in proof of work. Mm-hmm. Whereas in proof of work, you're spending electricity for a chance to win a new Stacks block, mm-hmm. For a chance to win a new block. In proof of transfer, you're spending Bitcoin. And so proof of burn was really just it actually like burned the base asset, but basically the early architects on Stacks realized that it would be more valuable. Like why would we burn Bitcoin? It's like the most valuable asset in the world. Why don't we transfer it to help to bootstrap the network?
Got it. That makes more sense. Thanks a lot. I think that's super interesting. So you mentioned, you have the own VM, Clarity. I think, I've heard of Clarity. Obviously, I know it's quite different from, at least for developers, right, or for engineers to be able to code in Clarity, quite different from the VM or like Solana VM. What would you say are like the main differences, and like what do you think needs to happen in order to get even more adoption of Clarity? Because I do think currently, if you look at the market of engineers, most people know obviously EVM. Some people know like Solidity or Rust, right? But so what about Clarity? How do we get to bigger adoption of Clarity?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the TLDR of Clarity is that it's a Lisp-like language. So the syntax is a little bit different than what some developers are used to. But it was basically designed with a couple of key properties in mind. So it's a decidable language, which means that developers can know exactly what a contract is going to do before it executes. It also has some additional security features like post conditions included as part of that. And so, I think those were some pretty intentional design decisions that the Stacks architects made early on as part of that. But to your point, I think when you look at the market right now, there's no denying that, EVM and Rust have like clear network effects. So we're actually, one of the initiatives that we're taking on at Labs is developing a WASM compiler. So building an integration with WebAssembly that will allow us to build additional runtimes that ultimately compile. We compile that bytecode and we can deploy those contracts on Stacks. And so ultimately we want to make Stacks the best place for developers to build applications. And I think it's clear that providing more optionality in terms of, what languages developers can use to build that, we should be able to provide that flexibility. So I think the first one that we're looking to release is a Rust runtime. But of course, we're also looking at EVM and even probably Move as part of that. That would be a part of our longer term roadmap.
Got it. That would be, I think, a big unlock when it comes to like attracting more developers and builders to kind of build cool apps on top of stacks for sure. So, I mean, kind of basically seems like you're building a complete like new stack. I mean, out of nothing, right? Like, what are like the main challenges that you guys face? Like, what were the moments where you thought like, shit, is this like really the best way to like, should we continue on this trajectory, which is obviously super hard, or like, what were the main challenges that were like really like, whew, tough?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, when designing Bitcoin L2s, we had certain design considerations in mind as part of that. And so the first is really designing it in a way with the security and trust assumptions in mind. Right. So, the goal for Stacks is to be able to unlock Bitcoin programmability without introducing any new trust assumptions, or ideally at the least amount of new trust assumptions that we can as part of that. And so, really, the way that we have been, the approach that we've been taking with this is different than, say, the central custodian model, custody all the funds, or even, a small MPC model. The design goal for projects like SBDC is to be a much more decentralized alternative to that. So actually integrating threshold signatures that are distributed across a decentralized network of validators to make sure that there's no one party that has control over the system. And so obviously, finding the right like levers to pull or trade-offs in terms of how do we achieve the security thresholds and trust assumption levels that we want, while still being able to release products quickly, iterate on these designs, and likely gradually decentralize the system over time.
I guess not an easy job. It probably means a lot of trade-offs to be made and like decisions to be made. But no, I mean, that's awesome to hear how you guys overcome these challenges as well. What would you say like the current status is of the Stacks ecosystem? Like, what are the things currently going on? Like, what are the big things that are happening in the ecosystem? I think SBTC is something interesting. The Nakamoto upgrade is something that obviously has popped up quite a bit on my feed recently. Tell me more about all of these things.
Sure. So I guess let's just start at a high level, right? So the Nakamoto upgrade is the sort of major update that the Stacks ecosystem is working on. There's a lot of resources going towards that. At a high level, you can think about it as a security and performance improvement of the chain. And so today, Stacks creates blocks one-to-one with Bitcoin blocks. That means that Stacks blocks are produced roughly every 10 minutes. Given the state of the art of other blockchains out there, clearly that is not sufficient. And so, the first goal was, okay, how do we provide lower latency transactions that can help to scale Bitcoin to improve on that user experience. And so with Nakamoto Upgrade, we're expected to achieve between 25 to 50x improvement over that threshold. So, Stacks blocks will be produced roughly sub 30 seconds, probably 10 to 30 seconds are the benchmarks that I've seen. And so, this is a large step just to unlocking greater scalability with also security in mind. So another one of the design goals for Nakamoto is basically to be able to inherit 100% of Bitcoin finality guarantees. And so that means that reorging a Stacks block or reversing a Stacks transaction would be as difficult as reversing a Bitcoin L1 transaction. And so, both of these qualities were very important design principles when constructing SBTC. So SBTC is the other major initiative that we have ongoing at the moment. It's a one-to-one Bitcoin-backed asset that lets you move Bitcoin in and out of DeFi via the Stacks blockchain. And so, and it's secured again by the decentralized network of validators that have onboarded to Stacks through the Nakamoto Upgrade. And so, with that, ultimately the vision is that we can offer, more programmability for Bitcoin with faster transactions and Bitcoin L1 security guarantees. And so that's ultimately the vision for these two upgrades and what it can unlock for the ecosystem. And I think as part of that, we have a very passionate community of people that, early on believed that, Bitcoin was more than just digital gold, more than just a store of value, but could actually be used as a programmable asset to be used in applications, also as a medium of exchange and unit of account. And so you need these sorts of improvements to be able to offer that. And so, now we have dozens of applications that are building on the Stacks network, that are all sort of gearing up in anticipation of this release. So, some of the applications that we can talk about are, a lot of, certainly lending and borrowing is one of the first use cases that we're seeing a lot of demand for, both from developers and also from users that want to be able to borrow against their Bitcoin, access fiat without incurring a taxable event to, either go leverage long or purchase real estate or something like that. So we have applications like Granite that just recently came out of stealth. They're a company that was incubated by Trust Machines. Zest is another great example of that. You have projects like Hermetica that is being able to offer, they're a Bitcoin-backed native stablecoin where you can borrow against your Bitcoin and deploy the stablecoins for up to 25% APY. And so, basically what we're seeing is that there is a growing ecosystem of applications that are just, ready for these upgrades and are looking forward to what it can unlock in terms of this more native Bitcoin functionality.
Got it. That's awesome. So a whole new range of applications kind of being unlocked by in a way these upgrades to the network, and especially like enabling faster transactions, but without compromising on the security. That sounds awesome. In terms of applications, so I guess most of these, like what you mentioned, like borrowing, lending, stable coins. I'm assuming there will be a DEX as well. What is it like? Do you expect anything specifically that we haven't seen elsewhere that you say this is only possible on Stacks?
Yeah, well, so to answer your question, there are currently 3 DEXs that are live on Stacks. They're all sort of competing in this space. Bitflow, Valar, and Alex. Each of them have different user experiences, different features. Interestingly, Valar is working on the first perp DEX on Bitcoin. So I think that we'll see some interesting usage there, given we know that's a very popular product in other parts of the DeFi ecosystem. I think that those are definitely some of the ones that are interesting. I'll also add Bitcoin staking. That there's a project called Stacking DAO that is the largest liquid staking provider on Stacks. I know that they're currently looking at ways that they can unlock Bitcoin yield as part of that. So yield generation, borrowing and lending, decentralized trading and exchange are I think probably going to be the first use cases where we see a lot of early traction.
That's great. And I follow a lot of these protocols already. I actually had like the Tycho from Zest on in the podcast as well, but we'll definitely hit up some of these guys as well to come and talk about their products here and see what they are cooking. Seems like you guys are set up for great things in the next couple of months. Probably will be a busy end of the year for you guys as well. Now, I know we are kind of running out of time very soon, so I want to shift maybe to the last section of the podcast, in which I want to talk more about how to deal with all of these, in a way, pressure points and like challenges from a personal perspective, man. Like it looks like you're obviously involved in a lot of different things, different protocols and upgrade, like different people to manage, talk to. How do you keep up with all of it. Obviously, you have been in the space for a very long time as well, right? Which is quite unique. A lot of builders or people that give up at some point. They're done with it. They're burnt out. What's your magic sauce to kind of keep going and keep going with so much energy?
Yeah, I think a couple of things really help me to manage all of these different parts. I think the first is really prioritizing health in a meaningful way in my personal life. And so, the only way I think that good health is at the foundation of everything else. And so I try to maintain a pretty active lifestyle in terms of, strength training, yoga, cycling, things like that. That certainly helps to be able to keep the energy up and keep going through all of this. I think really just being committed to the mission. I think that this is really my life's work is being able to build on Bitcoin and unlock a lot of the functionality that we've talked about on this podcast. So it's pretty easy for me to stay motivated. I couldn't really see myself working in any other industry. What we have here is very unique in terms of being able to work on meaningful work with great people. And so, I think that helps me to find the right sort of balance there.
Yeah, makes sense. And I mean, I have to repeat that for the people who didn't listen. Take care of your health because it's super important. If you don't, everything else is irrelevant. So yeah, stay healthy and stay active and fit. There's this thing, right? They say eat meat, lift weights, and buy BTC. I think that's the lifestyle.
I try to live by those words.
I think all of us for sure. Last topic I want to touch on very briefly, and it's more coming from a personal view as well. Also, having seen you at a bunch of these conferences, what do you think the current state of crypto conferences is? I'll give you very briefly my view, right? I've always liked and enjoyed to go to conferences, make new connections, see a lot of people that are building in the space. But what I feel a little bit is it's a lot of the same people just basically traveling to different cities. And we end up meeting the same people in different cities. But in a way, I don't see the same amount of attention for the things that are being presented. People are doing such an effort to present something. You have the panels with a lot of interesting topics, but the audience is kind of too busy networking. And I don't know, where is this going, right? What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, Jeroen, obviously we had a chance to hang out a lot in Asia over the past couple of weeks at different conferences. I kind of left Token feeling maybe we've overcorrected on that. I mean, like you, I love being able to meet up with people in real life, make new friends, new connections. But, it kind of felt like Token was even the tipping point there where there were, probably over 1,000 side events. It was, very fragmented and often difficult to even, run into the people that you wanted to see there because of how many different side events are going on. In addition to that, I think you kind of accurately pointed out that you go to these events and you're kind of talking to the same people. Right. And so, what are the things that we can do to, break out of that, to actually talk to new users and kind of get out of our own little bubble or echo chamber? It feels like that's going to be important as we, enter into this next phase of growth in crypto and really start to think about how do we bring the next, several million people on chain.
Man, I couldn't agree more. Let's get out of this echo chamber and bring even more people into our echo chamber and into our industry of crypto, where and especially you guys are building great stuff. I think on that note, I think we can end. Maybe one last thing from your end. Where can people find you? Where should they follow you? Where should they stay up to date?
Yeah, you can follow me on X. Handle is at Andre R. Serrano. You can also go to bitcoinrights.com. I write a regular newsletter on updates on Bitcoin and everything happening in the Stacks ecosystem.
Awesome. That is great. We'll definitely do that. We'll put these links in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much, Andre, for joining me today. It was a pleasure to have you, and I'm sure I'll see you soon around on the Crypto Circus circuit.
Absolutely.
See you, buddy.
Thanks again.
Bye bye.